Hi everybody, this is Dan Stolbarger. Welcome to this week's KFIR Middle East Update. It's the week of July 30th, and before we jump into just sort of our news bites, just a reminder, get the PDF PowerPoint. You can get that on our website at holygroundexplorations.com, or there should be a link on this YouTube site. So what's going on in the Middle East? Our news bites, Biden it seems to be getting much tougher with Iran, and it's kind of going back and forth though, because Lindsey Graham is applying pressure by saying that we have entered into what he calls a nightmare scenario. If the U.S. doesn't take a strong stance right now, because Iran is so close to being weaponized as far as in the nuclear arena, Lindsey Graham says, quote, "I've never been more worried about Israel having to use military force than I am right now." So again, we know there's a red line. We just don't know what the timetable is, but it's my job here to be that watchman on the wall and sort of yell out, watch out, this may be coming. Well, it seems also, shift gears a bit here, that Naftali Bennett, the new Prime Minister of Israel, is ramping up his criticism of the unvaccinated. Sharply worded comments that basically make the statement that those that are unvaccinated are endangering the health of those around them and the freedom of every Israeli citizen. Again, we're going to find later in this presentation there's a third booster shot that's now happening in Israel for the 60 and older. So there seems to be this full court press to get every Israeli vaccinated. So again, unfortunately for us here that want to take people to Israel, we're having to postpone our tours once again because of the latest outbreak. And Israel's trying to get this under control, but at this point in time, not happening. Ben and Jerry's. I'm just tired of this subject. BDS, Ben and Jerry's. Again, the ignorance of all of those in BDS, not just Ben and Jerry's, to ignore the fact that the Jews have been residents in Judea and Samaria for over 3 millennia, and that the Palestinian Authority has adopted racist laws, apartheid, unlike anything else as far as Jews buying land, etc., etc. I mean, this can't even compare to the apartheid in South Africa in terms of the Palestinians, but once again, beating that drum. Anti-Semitism once again. I mean, we actually have reports of swastikas being carved into the elevators of our State Department. Anyhow, the world in which we're living. Those are our news bites. Our articles this week, let's begin with the U.S., Israel, and Iran. An easy subject, right? Lapid and Bennett and Benny Gantz are again warning the U.S. in terms of the situation in Iran, basically saying it's a few minutes before midnight, and they are extremely close to obtaining a nuclear weapon. What you gonna do? Now, as we reported last week, the first country that's been hosted in the White House under the Biden administration has been Jordan, not Israel. But when King Abdullah was there, I think he may have tipped the scales in a positive way, because he informed our administration of what's taking place with Iran. The attacks of Iranian drones, rockets and missiles that have been aimed at Israel but fell short. The ballistic guided missile programs, the cyber attacks, drone attacks, and on and on. And so we have a third party, Jordan, raising the issue of, we got to do something about Iran. And again, all Israel can say is, amen. Now, we've got the situation with a two-state solution once again. My friends in Israel will tell me, I don't care what you hear, it will never happen. And the reason it will never happen is not going to be the failure of Israelis. We have offered more than enough, but whenever it gets to that point of signing on the dotted line, because the issue is not land, the issue is the existence of the Jewish state, Palestinians will never agree to it. And so, even though we're starting to hear rumblings of co-oping between Israel and the Palestinians, I don't put too much stock in it. This is an article, however, that Benny Gantz, the defense minister of Israel, is calling for the first time one of the leaders in the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, and wishing him a happy, and I will butcher this Arabic, a happy Muslim Eid al-Adha holiday. For them, it's a celebration or the remembrance of Abraham offering not Isaac, but Ishmael. Okay? This conversation is the first time in 4 years that a senior Israeli minister has reached out to a Palestinian leader. The last time 4 years ago with Netanyahu. So again, we're seeing movement in this direction, but I don't put too much credence in it. And now we have I don't know if I'd say bigger issue, but we have the issue of Lebanon. There is a growing concern among Arabs, not just Israelis, Arabs, that Iran is planning to exploit the severe economic and financial crisis currently in Lebanon, and thus literally take over the country. Iran, as you know, already has a major military presence there with Hezbollah, but could it be that the Iranians will literally allow Lebanon to fall and replace them, occupy them? It's already a very dangerous state without a nuclear bomb that they have, even though they're closer and closer. But can you imagine being Israel at this time, seeing Lebanon fall only to be replaced by Iran? Well, I mentioned this beforehand. A third COVID shot is it's a world first. Israel's now officially approving a third shot for the elderly in terms of the coronavirus. Again, unfortunately for us, we've had to put on hold our fall Israel tour because of this outbreak. And it's, again, I'm not going to get into the vaccination, pro, anti, etc., but this is far from being under control. The Knesset Arab Party, this one's near and dear to our hearts. Let me just read this first, and then I'll tell you our personal story about this. In the Knesset this week, the parents of Max Steinberg had come, in a sense, to have a meeting to commemorate Max's life. Max was a lone soldier that was killed in the summer of 2014 in a war against Hamas. In the Knesset with the parents there, everybody in the Knesset stood to applaud, have a moment of silence in remembrance of Max, except for the Arab Knesset members from the joint list and the who remained seated in their seats while everybody else stood in memorial. Again, the response from Israelis, simply this: the place of terrorist supporters is in prison, not in the Knesset of Israel. The reason this is so memorable to me and Sharon is we met Max. We work on IDF bases from time to time when we take groups to Israel. And they look for work for us to do. And it's the best part about it is kind of hobnobbing and working together with the soldiers. And my wife had the opportunity to paint part of a military installation, and who was painting with her but Max? And again, a lone soldier, near and dear to our hearts. May his memory be a blessing. Well, wrapping up, a couple other things. Tokyo, the Olympics. You know, it's been 49 years since 11 Israeli athletes were brutally murdered by the Palestinians in the 72 Munich Olympics. And did you know there hasn't been any sort of gesture of respect for the Israelis that were killed until this year? So hats off to the Tokyo Olympics, who in a sense dedicated these Olympics to the victims of the Munich massacres. And in your slides, that's why get the PDF. Look through these names, and may their memory be a blessing as well. Again, there's just artwork here of a map. The threat of Iran as America withdraws from the Middle East. Are we seeing a bounce of power shifting to the Iranians? Take a look at this. And again, enough said. Couldn't help but show you the latest ad for Ben & Jerry's from Israel. Judea and Samaria's finest, Ben & Jerry's, frozen, chosen people. Okay, that's it for our Middle East update for this week. A reminder, I've already mentioned it, but we do have dates for our spring tour. It will be March 27th through April 5th. We do have an optional pre-trip that we're planning right now. That would be the 20th through the 26th to Poland, both to Krakow, where we'll visit Auschwitz-Birkenau, Schindler's Factory, that's in Krakow area, and then we'll move on to Warsaw Ghetto, an amazing museum or whatever. It's my belief that believers in this day need to walk through Auschwitz, Birkenau, because never again. Well, again, pray about joining us. God bless you all. Shalom.